The Transportation Secretary joins us now. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you very much for coming on. Can you tell us more about the security improvements at SEA, the SeaTac Airport?
Yeah, you've got a lot of demand, a lot of traffic, and a lot of growth. Now, economically, that's good news, but that means we've got a lot of infrastructure that needs to keep up, especially in this region. We've got $16 million that we're directing towards SeaTac so that they can relocate one of their TSA checkpoints. It's in an upstairs departure area right now. Moving it downstairs is going to be a convenience win, and it's going to help traffic flow better. This is on top of a $26 million grant that we sent to the airport last year for restrooms, amenities, and the passenger experience. A big part of the experience of airline passengers is, of course, the conditions of the airport, and we want to make sure we're supporting that. It's one of the reasons why we pushed so hard to get this infrastructure built through Congress, and now we're putting those dollars to work.
Beyond that, there's a lot of many questions about staffing and all the flight delays. Now, some of it is weather, and you can't help that. But there are also reports that the FAA is just flat out understaffed. Is it?
Yes, we need to get more people into air traffic control positions. And that's not a simple thing because training for that job rightly is a very thorough and complex process. It can take 2 or even 3 years to fully get through qualification, not just to be an air traffic controller in general, but to work a particular airspace or a particular airport, which means even here in 2023, we're still living with some of the impacts of the training that was disrupted in 2020. Now, I want to be clear. This is part of a much bigger picture. If you look at the airline industry's own data, it would suggest that about 8% of the delay minutes you see in the system have to do with staffing issues at air traffic control. So it's a long way from being the number one cause or even the number two cause of delays and issues, but certainly something that we're concerned about. It's why we're pushing so hard with Congress and Capitol Hill to get more funding. We got about 1,500 new controllers we're hiring and training this year. We're planning for another 1,800 next year. And we also got to make sure we have the right kind of equipment to get the most effective use of those controllers as they're on their positions. All of that's part of our plans within the FAA. And then at the same time, we're pushing very hard on the airlines to make sure they have the staffing that they need and that they schedule in a realistic way. And I think that pressure is paying off. Last week we had tough, severe weather issues, but as a general pattern, we're at or below 2% most of the time this year in terms of cancellation rates, which is a dramatic improvement from last year. And I think it reflects the airlines responding to that pressure, moving in the right direction, but clearly a long way to go.
Mr. Secretary, Chris Sullivan, the transportation reporter here. I saw you've also got $26 million roughly for EV charging and whatnot. I know that's a huge issue for our governor here in this state. What will that bring us? Because to get a level 3 chargers, about $40,000 for one port, about $6,000 for a level 2. Where do you see that money going and it being able to handle what is the coming of the EV wave?
Well, what we're doing with the electric charging funding is partnering with the states on the theory that we're not going to know all the places that the chargers ought to go or the details from Washington. We shouldn't say we have all the answers at headquarters, but we do need to provide more of the funding. So we've laid out the standards that we think the electric vehicle charging networks need to have. They need to be transparent. They need to be user-friendly. They need to be interoperable. So if you got one company's charger, you don't have to worry about whether you have the wrong company's app. Any user ought to be able to use all of them. And when we're talking about the national network, you should never go more than 50 miles without coming to a charger. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight, but the president's goal is to have 500,000 chargers installed in this country by the end of this decade. And as we drive toward that goal, the benefit of it, of course, is that more and more Americans will be able to take advantage of that choice of an electric vehicle. And the more we do that, the more we're going to be able to see an alternative to gas fuel that obviously, in addition to the climate implications, has these economic ups and downs. We've seen the numbers, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, unusually high gas prices, doing everything we can to keep, as an administration, to keep petroleum prices under control. But the best thing we can do, of course, is to rely on American clean energy. to power our American clean vehicles. And that's the direction we're trying to take the economy, with the manufacturing jobs that come with it, as well as the convenience and, of course, the cleaner air.
Since I've got you here, and I don't get this chance very often, you talked about unusually high Washington gas prices. Most estimates say 40 to 45 cents of that high gas price is because of our state's brand new carbon taxes on polluters. What are your thoughts on carbon prices and carbon fees, that as a way to try to get at the polluters, even though they usually now end up going to the consumer?
Well, from the federal level, we respect the independence of states to choose their own policies in that regard. But what I would say, again, is that our focus is to try to make sure there are good choices and good alternatives. We see so much work going on in order to get better and more affordable clean energy alternatives. I'm seeing what they're doing with the ferry system, even to make it electric. And of course, there's everything that's going on with vehicles. But to really drive the prices down, you need to get to the right level of scale. And that's where we think that we can help. Even as different states pursue different policies, we want to make sure there's a baseline of federal support to make it more accessible, more convenient, and more affordable to access these alternative ways of getting around, so that you don't have to be subject to these ups and downs of world oil markets, or worry about what's going on in the politics of the Middle East, or any of the other things that go into our gas prices.
Just one more thing. Is there any progress into developing a self-healing concrete so there doesn't have to be so many repair projects getting in the way of my commute?
You were talking about one of my favorite subjects. I used to be a mayor. The epic confrontation of mayors versus potholes is one of the most important dynamics, I think, in local government. And so pavement durability is a hot topic in my office. And believe it or not, we are actually doing some exciting work on this. I can't promise self-healing bridges in the next year or two, but there is extraordinary work in this unsexy field of materials and pavement that I think in the long run will mean fewer potholes, longer-lasting bridges, and I think it deserves federal funding for research. So it might not be the biggest part of our budget, but I think it's pretty exciting, and I'm glad you brought it up.
That warms my heart. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Good talking with you.
It is